the sun hovered low in the sky, casting long shadows across the bustling streets of downtown. Amid the rhythmic noise of passing cars and the incessant chatter of eager voices, a small, brightly colored cart stood still and inviting. Its metal frame gleamed with the silver sheen of freshly polished cookware, while the tantalizing aroma of caramelized onions and sizzling sausages wafted through the air, creating an oasis of comfort amidst the chaos. Behind the cart, Javier Reyes adjusted his faded apron, a motley patchwork of grease stains and wear that told a story of countless hard days. At 40, he bore the weight of years etched into his weathered hands and creased forehead, but his spirit remained unyielded. Javier was a street vendor, a proud cook peddling food that could warm the coldest of hearts. Each morning, he arrived before dawn, kneading dough and perfecting recipes, hoping that the flavors he offered could transcend his modest circumstances. Business was a struggle, stommers could be fickle, and every dime spent on ingredients felt like an intricate gamble against an unrelenting tide of expenses. Despite his financial challenges, Javier held on to a fierce belief in kindness. He often recalled the warmth his abuela had imparted, recalling how she used her last morsels of food to feed those less fortunate even when her own pantry was bare. El corazón siempre encuentra su camino, she would say, the heart always finds its way. Something in that sentiment guided him, a whisper of hope that drew him beyond mere survival toward a purpose greater than himself. On that particular day, the sun blazed overhead, and Javier's stomach grumbled louder than usual, a painful reminder of how thin his finances had grown lately. Business had been slow, last week's receipts hung uncomfortably in his pocket, weighing him down with worry. Yet here he was, endeavoring to serve the last 2 sausages he'd saved for his lunch. His pride wouldn't allow him to give up the cooking that filled his soul, but it was terrifyingly clear, today might not yield enough money to pay the bills. Lost in thought, he watched as a group of tourists ambled by, lost in the excitement of their adventure. They pointed at his cart, laughed, and snapped photos, but none of them stopped. Javier sighed, wiping the back of his hand against his forehead, which gleamed with sweat. Just then, at the edge of his vision, he noticed a figure on the cracked sidewalk wrapped in fraying blankets, a man, whose beard was thick with neglect and whose eyes held a brief spark of awareness. He looked weathered by life, so familiar in demeanor, yet so far removed from Javier's world. An impulse surged through Javier, one stronger than the desperation gnawing at his insides. He walked over to the man, his heart drumming with uncertainty. "Excuse me, sir," he said softly. The man looked up, his brow furrowed with surprise and guardedness. "Would you like something to eat?" "It's on me." For a moment, silence enveloped them, and Javier felt the weight of his offering slip between them like an unspoken connection. The man's surprise morphed into disbelief, raw vulnerability spilling forth as he slowly nodded, the lines on his face softening. "Thank you," he replied, his voice cracking like a dry twig. Javier hurried back to the cart and prepared a plate, carefully layering a sausage with grilled onions and a side of warm bread. He returned, setting the feast delicately in the man's lap. As the warmth wafted up between them, it carried more than the flavors, it held a fragile hope. Javier watched as the man ravenously picked at his meal, the food disappearing as if it were a long-lost dream that had finally returned. The scene felt timeless, the world around them blurring into a mere backdrop. In that quiet moment, they were tied by a shared understanding, a recognition of struggle that transcended social barriers. "Can I ask your name?" Javier ventured, eyes with curiosity. "David," the man replied, mouth full yet somehow managing to maintain a beaming smile. "I used to be a teacher, you know. Lost a lot along the way." "It's nice to meet you, David," Javier said, feeling a warmth spread through his chest that diluted the sting of his unfulfilled ambitions. Hearing David's story ignited something within him that he had been starving for, connection. They shared their tales, of dreams, loss, and the small joys that made life bearable. Each exchanged word was imbued with something inexplicable, an electric comfort that made harsh realities feel just a pinch softer. When David finished his meal, he looked up at Javier, gratitude shining in his eyes. "You've filled my belly, but you've also filled my heart today, my friend." "Just passing on the kindness," Javier replied, blinking back the unexpected emotion swelling in his throat. As he turned to return to the cart, he felt an inexplicable warmth flooding through him, a sense of pose swirling with renewed hope. What he didn't realize was that in reaching out to David, he had set forth a chain reaction, a beautiful ripple of kindred spirits woven together through a simple act of giving. And in this unassuming moment, Javier began to understand, perhaps for the first time in a long while, that kindness, indeed, has a way of finding its way back around. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden rays on the vibrant streets of Nashville, where music and laughter danced in harmony. Javier watched David relish the last bites of his meal, a smile creeping onto his face despite his own hunger. Their shared moment lingered, stitching together the fabric of their lives in a way that only kindness could forge. "Can I ask you something?" David said, wiping his mouth with a crumpled napkin. "What do you really want in life?" Javier hesitated, the question hanging like a feather in the still evening air. His dreams came rushing back, a small restaurant filled wider, a welcoming space where people gathered over plates of food infused with love. "I want my own place to serve food, a real restaurant," he finally admitted. "I want to create a home for others where they can come together and enjoy a good meal." David studied him, nodding as if he understood the silent depths of Javier's yearning. "Then let's make that happen," he said, an intriguing glint in his eyes. "I have some contacts in the restaurant industry, not many, but enough to get you started. I could connect you with some people who might help. But first, you have to let me know how I can help you." "What do you mean?" Javier asked, curiosity sparking in his mind. "Well," David replied, his voice dropping conspiratorially, "you showed me kindness when I had nothing. It's the least I can do. Just think of me as your first customer, the one who believes in you." Javier's chest swelled with gratitude. The conversation with David had illuminated a part of himself he feared wasn't. As they spoke, word spread among the tourists, and one inquisitive group approached the cart, drawn in by the enticing aroma of spices and sizzling sausages. They overheard the tail end of the conversation, intrigued by the notion of generosity and opportunities. One woman, with curly brown hair tied up in a playful bun, stepped forward. "I couldn't help but overhear," she said, smiling brightly. "Can we have a taste of what you're cooking here?" Javier, feeling suddenly invigorated, served them samples, their approving murmurs and laughter resonating like the sweetest of melodies. Each bite sparked joy and curiosity intertwined, sending a glimmer of hope racing through his heart. The group devoured the food, a quintessential bond of strangers crossing paths in the middle of life's chaos. After finishing their meal, the woman, whose name was Lucy, asked, "This food is incredible. Do you have a restaurant?" "No," Javier admitted, a slight tremor in his voice. "I sell food from my cart, but I dream of having my own restaurant one day." A flurry of conversations erupted within the group, Lucy animatedly directing her friends to listen closely. "You know, I work at a local magazine focused on local businesses," she said. "We're always on the lookout for unique food vendors to showcase. If I can get you some exposure, it might just give you the push you need to achieve your dreams." Javier's heart raced. "Really? You would do that for me?" "Of course. We love celebrating the local community. Your story is beautiful, and we need more of that." That evening left Javier buoyant with hope. Each encounter fueled the fire of ambition that simmered within him. As the sun set over the horizon, painting everything a rich caramel hue, Javier went home feeling as if the universe had aligned in his favor. Days turned into weeks, and the connections he'd made began to blossom. Lucy published an article that highlighted Javier as a unique talent in the food scene, emphasizing the heartwarming story of his generosity toward David. The piece was beautifully written, blending his passion for cooking with the spirit of community and kindness, really pulling at the heartstrings of readers. Almost immediately, the response was overwhelming. People flocked to his cart, sharing their own stories of hardship and resilience, grateful for the flavors of food that resonated with their lives. Javier found himself invigorated by the connections he formed with the customers who now stopped by every day. They shared not only meals but laughter and conversations that intertwined their stories with his, building a small community around his cart. Then came the turning point. A local entrepreneur, fascinated by the combination of heartfelt food and the story of kindness, approached Javier one sunny afternoon. A tall man in a tailored suit, he introduced himself as Marcus, a venture capitalist with a fondness for culinary talent. I saw the article about you, I was impressed, Marcus admitted, leaning against the cart with an easy charm. There's something really special about the way you connect to your customers. I've been looking to invest in someone who is passionate and committed like you. Would you be interested in discussing a potential partnership? Javier's heart raced. What do you mean by partnership? I want to help you invest in your dream of opening that restaurant, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. I've got the resources, you've got the vision. I truly believe we can create something incredible together. I'm talking about a 5-figure investment. Javier felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. Could it really be possible? It seemed unfathomable to think he could be on the brink of achieving something he had only dreamed about. Oblivious to the world around him, he could only nod, his heart pounding in rhythm with the unspoken hope blossoming in his chest. Weeks flew by as Javier and Marcus worked diligently on thence for the new restaurant, finding the perfect location in Nashville's vibrant food district and conceptualizing menus that highlighted his heritage. David became a crucial part of Javier's transformation, a hidden gem he called upon for additional support, mentoring over meals that blossomed into valuable brainstorming sessions. David, despite his past struggles, had emerged from a dark period and began piecing his life back together through his connections in the community and the small part-time work he had picked up through Javier's growing business. They became more than friends, they became brothers bound by trials, tribulations, and the promise of brighter tomorrows. On the day the restaurant officially opened, Javier stood in front of the space with Marcus, David, and a crowd of curious locals who had become his extended family. The robust scents of curries and baked bread wafted from the kitchen, the warmth echoing kindness that radiated through their friendship. Look at that kindness can do, David whispered, placing a hand on Javier's shoulder. All it takes is that first spark. Your heart opened a door, now it's just getting started. Together, they stepped inside, ready to welcome their first customers, laughing and jubilant as they prepped for the night ahead. As faces filled the seats, stories exchanged over dinner and laughter spilled onto the bright Nashville street, Javier felt as if he were finally whole. In that moment, he realized that dreams aren't solely achieved through hard work, they're woven into the fabric of every act of kindness, creating ripples that inspire others to reach back. The restaurant thrived, growing into a community hub filled with joy, each dish crafted with care and respect, each meal fostering connection. With each satisfied customer who walked out the doors carrying takeout boxes and smiles, Javier was reminded of the true reward of generosity, and how the world can change one dish, and one act of kindness, at aim. And as the evening faded into a symphony of laughter, he felt the universe's gentle embrace, guiding him toward a future drenched in newfound warmth and possibilities. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over Nashville, Javier stood in the bustling dining room of his restaurant, Casa de Javier. Lively chatter and laughter bounced off the walls, mingled with the alluring scents of spices wafting from the kitchen bustling with activity. The welcoming space spoke of home, with rustic wooden tables, flickering candles, and vibrant artwork that celebrated local culture. It was everything he had envisioned, and more. After the opening on a bustling Friday night, Javier often observed something astonishing unfold right in front of him. The ripple effect of kindness he had once extended toward a stranger began to return in waves, enriching not just his life but the lives of those around him. People who entered his restaurant had stories, they shared laughter heartaches while indulging in the samosas and curries that transcended mere food, transforming each meal into a tapestry woven with connection. Business was thriving, and for the first time in a while, Javier could breathe a bit easier. The supportive community had rallied around Casa de Javier, filling the seats for lunch and dinner. It became a safe haven, where everyone felt welcomed regardless of their background. The simple decor was eclipsed by the feeling of camaraderie blooming within the walls. And yet, amidst the flurry of success, Javier's heart remained deeply intertwined with the roots of kindness that had fostered this transformation. Just the other day, as the last patrons of the evening trickled out, a familiar face appeared at the entrance, David. His presence was brightened by a fresh sense of purpose. After months of hard work and dedication, David had secured a part-time job teaching literacy to children at a local nonprofit. With each step he took toward making his life, Javier felt the weight of his own heart lighten alongside his friend. One evening, sitting together at their favorite table, the restaurant bustling around them, David chuckled softly. You know, I've been thinking about how everything turned out, he started, a glimmer in his eyes. Your kindness changed the course of my life, Javier. Who would have thought we'd be here, together, enjoying this newfound happiness just because you offered me that meal? Javier looked at him, gratitude pouring from his spirit. I never could have imagined it either, my friend. You taught me that kindness is more than a moment, it's a chain reaction waiting to happen. The dialogue flowed naturally, wrapping them in warmth under the low-hanging lights. David's journey had reinvigorated Javier's own understanding of compassion, and together, they continued to nurture that spark, drawing in others who entered their lives. One day, as Javier organized deliveries of fresh produce, a gentle knock on the kitchen door interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find a young girl, not older than 8, her sparkly eyes wide with curiosity. Excuse me, sir, she said shyly, gripping a crinkled piece of paper in her small hands. I was wondering if you could help me. Kneeling down to her level, Javier smiled warmly. Of course, sweetheart. What do you need? My school is having a bake sale, and I want to sell cookies for my class, but we don't have enough money for the ingredients. Her voice faltered, the weight of her request visible on her petite shoulders. In that moment, the echoes of his abuela's teachings flooded Javier's mind. Everyone deserves a chance to find their footing, even a small child with a heartfelt wish. I can help you with that. Let's get you the ingredients you need, and I'll show you how to make those cookies too. Javier assured her. As they spent the afternoon in the kitchen, mixing batter, rolling dough, and laughing at flour-covered faces, realized this act of kindness reminded him of more than just generosity. It embodied the essence of community. As they baked, they formed bonds of friendship and empowerment. While teaching her, he noticed how her confidence blossomed and how genuine joy enveloped them both. When the day of the bake sale arrived, Javier encouraged the little girl to set up a small table outside the restaurant to display her cookies. Word spread quickly among regular customers, and soon, the laughter of children and adults alike filled the air as people lined up to support her. To watch those faces light up over something as simple as cookies made Javier burst with pride. As the little girl returned inside with a beaming smile and a handful of money she had earned, the fruits of her labor, he recognized the significance of that day. At first glance, it had seemed like a minor act, but in truth, it evolved into a transformative experience for both of them. Thank you, Mr. Javier. Now I can help MYSS, she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. Remember this moment, he replied, his heart swelling. You have the power to create change, just like I did. Kindness can stretch beyond us, making waves that cross rivers. As the months sped by, Casa de Javier continued to bloom like the wildflowers in spring. Attorneys, artists, and families graced his tables, weaving their own stories amidst the food and warmth. Javier found new inspiration in each person he encountered. He celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and promotions, hosting charity dinners that fed the homeless and provided them a sense of community within the restaurant. One evening, as the sun set beyond the city, casting a canvas of oranges and purples across the sky, Javier's eyes landed on a television screen mounted in the corner of the restaurant. A local news anchor featured an inspiring piece titled, Ride the Wave of Kindness, highlighting community leaders and businesses thriving due to generosity. He camera panned to Javier, talking animatedly about his experience with David and the young girl, and how a chain of kindness blossomed into a fulfilling business that enriched their lives. As the clip played, Javier felt a rush of emotion. It wasn't just about making delicious food anymore. The story represented the heart of the restaurant, a microcosm of life where each interaction fueled the momentum of love, hope, and connection. As the news segment faded, Javier found himself surrounded by warm laughter and nostalgic conversations. Patrons shared their favorite stories from the restaurant, recalling moments that felt like family celebrations. Javier stood there, thankful for the opportunity to create a space that resonated with such positive energy, where everyone belonged. A future unfurled ahead of him, shimmering with endless possibilities. On a quiet Sunday, while cleaning up after another bustling brunch, Javier turned toward David, who was engrossed in a conversation with one of the customers. Suddenly, it hit him like a tidal wave, the realization of what truly mattered. David, Javier said, grabbing a moment to share, this may sound crazy, but I want to have a cooking class for kids at the nonprofit where you work. I want to show them how to prepare simple meals, spreading the kindness we've built here to the next generation. David's eyes sparkled, lighting up with enthusiasm. That's an incredible idea. You could teach them the same values that shaped you. You can cultivate the spirit of compassion in even the youngest hearts. The next chapter of their journey began with determination, bridging connections beyond the walls of Casa de Javier. Together, they reached out to the local nonprofit, establishing a partnership dedicated to nourishing physical bodies and spirits alike. Month by month, the cooking classes grew, a sanctuary for children to transform ingredients into flavorful meals while discovering the value of generosity amongst Javier's heart swelled with pride as he watched the children giggle and experiment, witnessing glimmers of passion ignite within them. Each session felt like magic, a celebration of sharing and eating together, laughter rippling through the room as knowledge found a home in the eyes of eager learners. That summer, as the last class wrapped up and the sun began its descent into evening, Javier stood outside, leaning against the wall and reflecting on the journey that led him to this moment. The countless connections he forged through kindness, not merely to strangers, but also to those who embraced him with open arms, had transformed his life in ways he could have never imagined. It was a chance encounter that began this dance of fulfillment, a simple meal extended from one heart to another. And now, with every action he took, he saw the echo of kindness ripple through the community, flowering back at him in abundance. Each class, each dish, each story, contributed to a greater linking together hopes, dreams, and humanness against the odds. Then, on a seemingly ordinary day, the restaurant buzzed with guests, when a well-known chef approached Javier. "I've been watching your progress," he said, warmly shaking Javier's hand. "Your story has resonated with so many. I'd like to invite you to compete in a culinary challenge on national television." Javier was taken aback by the opportunity. It felt surreal. "Are you serious?" he stammered. "Absolutely. You've created something remarkable here. I want to give you a platform to share your talents and story with an even wider audience. It could propel your restaurant into a caliber you had only imagined," the chef replied, brimming with confidence. Javier felt everything inside him ignite, his heart soared at the thought of potential. "Thank you. I'd be honored." As preparations heated up for the competition, he felt an intense mix of excitement and nervousness coil inside. Not just on the edge of his dream at embarking on a new journey that represented all he stood for, and the philosophy of kindness that had brought him to this point. As the competition day arrived, with cameras flashing and judges waiting, Javier took a deep breath, grounding himself in the present. With every beautifully plated dish he presented, he spoke of his inspirations, the flavors of his childhood, the people whose lives he crossed paths with, and the lessons of compassion learned along the way. The judges nodded appreciatively, recognizing the depth beyond the flavors. As the final decision loomed, win or lose became secondary to the profound sense of growth he felt in his heart. It was about connection, about reaping the rewards of kindness that transcended momentary accolades. Weeks later, when the results aired, Javier received the news. He didn't just win the competition, he had woven together the tales of kindness and love that enveloped his coworkers and patrons alike. People rallied behind Casa de Javier, and support poured in from across the country. When the camera turned to him, live on air, Javier caught a glimpse of the satisfaction in the eyes of his staff, the friendships forged in kindness, and the legacy that had redundantly bloomed in his own life and skill. He smiled, humbled by the flood of gratitude. As the lights dimmed in the backdrop of his story, one thing became apparent: the fullness Javier felt in his heart was immeasurable. What had begun as an act of kindness had transformed into something that swelled beyond all expectations: a flourishing restaurant, vibrant connections, and countless lives touched through a ripple effect of compassion. "So, what's next?" David asked, beaming with pride as the crowd erupted in cheers. Javier looked out over the room, letting his heart lead the way. "To keep sharing this journey of kindness, one plate at a time. There is a world out there that needs connection, let's continue to serve it in full." In that moment, undayed by laughter, love, and the warm embrace of community, Javier felt like the universe had extended a bright hand, ready to unveil even more surprises, all blooming from the seed of kindness he had planted many seasons ago. It was merely the beginning of a beautiful journey that underscored the truth that, above all else, kindness created a home, not just within walls but within hearts.